we got rid of the little cage thing, the liberating structures that people needed. And we just said, hey, use the mindsets, make good decisions. And a lot of people were like, that's great. Thank you. We feel very trusted. Now, will you help us understand what we? Now, will you help us understand like what the
need a little more here?
And so we have started stepping more and more into like, how do we create structures that empower people to make decisions, but also give them some boundaries. People want boundaries. You know, Picasso had an edge of the canvas. Like the canvas stopped at some point, right? And so he had that to work with it. So what we try and do is figure out, how do we give people something to work inside of?
Welcome to the How to Buy or Sell a Business Successfully podcast. The concepts discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only. No attorney-client relationship is intended or formed by this podcast. No legal advice is intended in the substance of this podcast. Feel free to check out our website, www.goforemanlaw.com. Enjoy the show and welcome your hosts, Jake Wayman and Sam Foreman. Welcome back to another episode of How to Buy and Sell a Business Successfully. I'm Sam Foreman, one of your co-hosts today. We've got an amazing guest with us today, Ryan Bond. I am the founder of Foreman Law. Love working with folks buying and selling businesses. The best part of my life right now is definitely the radical candor that my children bring to the table every day. Several days ago, my 3-year-old comes up to me and he says, "Dad, why do you have a huge butt?" And, well, you know, you just learn a lot in life from your kids, and some of those are that you need to exercise a little bit more. So with that, let's pass it over to my co-host, Jacob Wayman. Speaking of exercise, take it away, Jake.
If you haven't, a side note, if you haven't followed Sam on LinkedIn, follow him. He puts like his dadisms on there and like what his conversations with his sons are, and he equates them to business. Fascinating. You should do that. But my name's Jake Wayman. Yes, my wife and I are the owners of Orange Theory Fitness here in Wichita. My wife really is the one that runs the show. I just do all the back office stuff and maybe be the pretty face, but my wife's way more pretty than I am. And I'm also a outsourced business development executive of Wayman Consulting Group. My job is to help organizations grow top line revenue. Funnest thing, most fun I'm doing right now, I'd say I've talked about this a lot in past episodes. My son is into monster trucks. We finally got to go to Monster Jam. Finally got to take him to Monster Jam. This kid was hooked. Like everything was like, I mean, just his eyes lit up and everything too. And like, I didn't take a lot of videos because I wanted to just be there with him in the moment. But like, it was the coolest thing to take him to Monster Jam. And so, yeah, that was fun.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's having a good time with that. Well, today we're hosting a really good friend of mine, known Ryan for quite some time now, through just various things in the community, through his work with Thrive, but also Leadership Wichita and a few other different things. But I'm joined today by the Chief People Officer of Thrive Restaurant Group, Ryan Bond. And Ryan, if you want to introduce yourself and what's going on in your life that's fun.
Yeah, I'd love to. So Ryan Bond, so glad to be here. I've listened to your podcast and seen the guests, and feel like today we might be scraping the bottom of the barrel, but see if we can pull it off. Yeah. I'm so happy to be here with y'all. So I'm the Chief People Officer at Thrive Restaurant Group. I love that job. Get to work with 8,000 amazing people every single day and learn a ton of lessons. So excited, maybe we can get into some of those today. What's fun in my life right now, I've got 3 daughters. They're all middle school, so 6th grade, 8th grade, junior. And the junior just finished production of Mary Poppins.
Okay.
And so I got to flex. I'm a former theater major in college.
Very cool.
Lover of that. So I got to work on some magic shelves, where the plates fall, and then Mary Poppins can pop them right back up into place. And that's so awesome. It was fun watching her go through that, and just the community that gets built around those sorts of productions. So that was last week, so that was pretty cool.
What role did she play in Mary Poppins?
She was the German heiress who was trying to run a money laundering scheme that Mr. Banks turned down and got fired. But then it all fell apart and he got rehired, and that's how the story goes.
Man.
So, yeah.
She was the villain.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. She's doing a lot of that for me. A lot of that stuff for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, tell us, if you would, a little bit about the Thrive story, a little bit about the company, and there's been a lot of organic growth, but also a lot of growth through acquisition. And so, tell our listeners a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so Thrive Restaurant Group, that's what we named it in 2018. Prior to that, it was called Sasnak Management Corp, which is Kansas spelled backwards. One of our founders jokes that's the only business he let his brother name. So he said it sounded like a vending machine company, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
So 1975 that was founded. So we're in our 50th year as an organization. Yeah, which is really, really cool. And so they have a great family legacy in this business. And 14 years ago is when I came around, and John Rolfe had kind of taken over operational leadership of the business from his dad and uncle, and was looking to give the thing 40 or 50 years more life. And that was the invitation to come in. So when I came into the business, it was really working and focusing on Carlos O'Kelly's, which was a concept they'd created in the 80s, and trying to give it another S curve and get it on a growth trajectory. And we did a lot of reinventing the way that the kitchens operate, the scratch food, new imaging, and all of that. And so that was kind of my first work in the business, and just learned so much. My first job was in McDonald's, but I would not say that I learned as much as I wished I had while I was doing that job, given what my career turned out like. But I'd come out of pharmaceutical sales and manufacturing and graduate school, and man, the real lessons that I learned in the hospitality industry have just been tremendous and life-changing, really, in terms of how I see the world, how I see my contribution, and how to appreciate just the hard day-to-day work, the dedication, and the attention that so millions of people across America pay to serving people who come in to eat every single day. Eating's one of those things that's never going to be outsourced to AI, right? At least that I can't see that.
Yeah.
But,
well, when you're living in Wichita, I mean, everywhere you go, there is a restaurant on every corner.
Yep.
And I think is the running joke, we have more restaurants per capita than like most cities around. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems like we are a community of people that love to eat.
Yeah, I've certainly heard that.
That feels true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, that checks out.
As long as there's good parking.
Yeah. Oh, always about the parking. Always about the parking.
If there's not good parking, then well.
Hey, one of the brands of Thrive is Homegrown, an amazing breakfast brunch spot. If you haven't been there, but we are neighbors in two of our locations at Orange Theory, and our downtown one. It's parking always seems to be like the thing we are faced all the time, but that place is packed all the time when I'm at. I wish they would come to Orange Theory like first, and then they would go there and they would go to you and then come to Orange Theory to work it off. One of the two. I don't really care. Just way we can blend that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Parking's an issue until it's not.
Yeah.
So, until people want to be there bad enough. So yeah, that's great.
Well, kind of on the Thrive story.
Yeah.
So you're saying 8,000 people, and I believe about 18 states, or maybe a little bit more than that, give or take.
Yep.
I mean, and you as a chief people officer, I mean, culture is what you live and breathe every single day. And I mean, that's a lot of people under a lot of different brands. So like, as you guys were going through the organic growth, acquisitions, what have you, how do you ensure culture remains still a unifying force across the different brands that you guys are growing and are maintaining through the 50 years too as well, but what the next 50 years hold as well? Yeah,
it's a great question. And I'll go back just a little bit to maybe answer it, because it wasn't, it's not something that we've manufactured or decided like, hey, this is the best way to do business. It's how this organization has been run for 50 years. And so 14 years ago when I started, we went to every restaurant location that we had. I think at the time it was about 65, and interviewed every management team. It was a listening tour, and said, hey, what are the things that tell me about the high point experiences that you've had. Tell me about the work that you're doing that gives you the most life. Like when you are feeling really good about your contribution, what's it look like? Like who's involved? What are you doing? And we gathered all of that information. And what we found was that people love doing their work when they can create advocates of their customers or their employees. They love helping people master the fundamentals of the work. So like teaching people how to do the job. They themselves being able to master the work of being a manager or leading people, right? They love that. They love focusing on the guest experience. like creating something memorable that someone's going to talk about, whether it's a perfectly plated piece of food, whether it's connecting with somebody, their kids may be being difficult and helping to solve that situation so they can enjoy, the people that they're there with. Like they just love serving people. And then the last thing was we talk a lot about how, when we're all 85, what are the stories that we're going to be telling? Like, what are the things, like if you're at your retirement party, hopefully it's before 85, but if you're there and you're talking about your career, you're not going to be talking about the earnings in Q2 of 2023 or, like that's not, it's going to be the people, right? It's going to be the legacy that you left of the people. And what we have just seen time and time again, the thing that people take the most pride in is, hey, I hired so-and-so, or they hired me, and look what they've done, look what I've done. And this kind of this passing along of legacy and benefit, from person to person over the course of time. So like this whole idea of people are a legacy. So those mindsets, we kind of codified those. And, we always have standard operating procedures, but we said, hey, look, if you've got these mindsets in mind, if you're focusing on the guest experience, if you're trying to create an advocate, if you're helping people master their job, and you are thinking about people as your legacy, so whether somebody is with you for 3 hours or 30 years, right? Like they're your legacy, and you're making decisions based on those mindsets, we are going to 99% of the time be in alignment around that decision. And so we doubled down on that. We uncovered what was true, and then we made that kind of the go forward. And from there, that has evolved into us realizing what our real opportunity is. And that is to help create work experiences for people where they can thrive and flourish. Yeah. Which is why we changed our name. It was aspirational and accountable. So like we're putting it out there. Like we're putting out Thrive Restaurant Group for a reason. Yeah. And it's not because we've arrived. Yeah. It's because we are trying to endeavor around something that is really hard. And a lot of people in restaurant businesses or convenience stores or any of these hospitality and service type jobs, they have such a bad reputation. And so we're like, hey, let's see if we can be different because we know that that's worked for people for many, many years here. Yeah. So let's just go do it. So that's where it started. So your question was about integration.
Yeah, because with M&A, I mean, that's what our podcast is meant for, is about buying and selling companies. And you all in the past, I think we talked this prior to the episode about past 5 years. I mean, the growth has been substantial from a lot of different brands you've brought on, growing your own brands. Yep. But that requires a lot of unifying, bringing cultures together. Yep.
So the way that we have approached integrating this, and again, this was not fully baked in the first one. We've had a lot of trial and error and learning, but what we have centered around as an integration strategy is an invitation. So when we're purchasing a company or what we view it as, like we were talking earlier, it's like a lot of people buy things based on a spreadsheet, right? And there are numbers, and that is real. And you have to buy things right for them to work in the long run, right? Even if you can add a ton of value to them. But all of those numbers that we make those purchasing and financial decisions on are simply the symptoms and the outcomes of a bunch of people and their behavior and their attitudes and the way that they show up and they do their job. And so when you're purchasing a company, what you're really buying are all of these people, their competency, their knowledge, the way that they work. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's not. And so what we've tried to get really good at is inviting people into a story that isn't theirs, but integrating their story into it through an invitation. So it's like, hey, we're inviting you to become a part of this story. And invitations are great because you can accept invitations or you can turn them down. Right. And what we want people to do is decide to accept an invitation. So it's not like, hey, you just have to continue because you're a part of this thing. It's like, we want you to be a part of this thing. Now, here's what we believe about how business works. And then we invite them into that. So it's into those mindsets. It's into this idea of respect and relationships and getting results, which is all about really how we do the work, not what work we're actually doing. And so in the in the very first upfront meetings that we have with teams that are coming to thrive, it's an invitation into a way of running a business that we believe is going to help them thrive and flourish, not only at work, but in their personal lives.
Yeah.
And then we're really patient. And we give people time to decide to walk on that road with us. And man, we'll walk for a long time. If you put one foot on the road and you want to walk down this road of trying to run the business in a different way, step into the full responsibility of your job, challenge beliefs that maybe you have around what leadership is or what it should look like, man, we will walk a long way. And we've done that with countless individuals. And I think what you would hear is that over time and through consistency, there's nothing you can tell people up front about how great it's going to be on day one of Thrive Restaurant Group that they're going to believe. You have to show them.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
Yeah.
And so it's the messaging that they hear from me. It's the experience that they have of John. It's the things that their operational leaders talk about and how they talk about them. You know, we can talk about labor productivity and how we need to improve our productivity. That's one way to talk about it. The other way to talk about it is, hey, we've got servers out there making tips. If we schedule too many servers, guess what happens? Nobody makes any money. And then guess what happens? Everybody quits. And then you're hiring a whole bunch of, so it's like, we can talk about these metrics in one of two ways. We can talk about them as financial goals, or we can talk about them as impact to people. And when you connect all the things that you do operationally and from a business perspective to, hey, look, our overarching goal is to help you thrive and flourish in your life and in your work, it changes the conversation that you can have about everything. And it is remarkable how much that connects with people, because isn't that what we all really want?
Yeah.
Like, don't you want to show up at work and be like, hey, I can make a difference here. And the people that I'm working for and with believe that I can make a difference.
Yeah.
And I know that because they told me and I didn't believe them. And then they showed me time and time again, over and over a course of time, right? And so that is, integration takes time, and patience and love and challenge. And but that's the approach that we take. We're inviting people into a story.
Well, I mean, that's got to translate back into the executive leadership team, like you're talking about more from a financial perspective. It's like the financial person who looks at spreadsheets all the time needs to understand that what you're doing on your side is going to impact the financial side. And what they're doing in financial is going to impact this side too, and how they relate with each other. But that takes, leadership at the top level to be communicating that, of like, we know it's going to take time, and be patient with the results that come behind it, because it's going to be long-term in the results you find.
Well, and that's a conversation I think that you have to have around, what is the real value that you can add to this acquisition, to this company, to this group of people? What's the real value you can add? Like, is it, and I'm sure I've heard some Coke people on here, they love comparative advantage, right? I hear them talk about it, and it's absolutely true. So like, our comparative advantage is that we believe that we can buy companies, and we can invite people into a journey where we are going to value add to the scope of their job. We're going to help them take on the full responsibility of their work. What we found in a lot of acquisitions is that the way that people run businesses is that they manage them and they really control them in the middle. And they don't let people make decisions. And then people feel disempowered by that, and they stop caring, or they develop learned helplessness. And so by restoring decision-making rights, by restoring responsibility, saying, hey, we trust you to make these decisions because of your role. You're running a $2.5 million business for us. We want you to pick your team. We want you to be able to make decisions about how the money gets spent, right? That they step into a way of being that is different and that they like better. And so then that changes their outlook and the things that they communicate with their team, and so on and so forth, right? And so it's when you look at what value you can create, I mean, there's obviously, like, we can reduce the price of groceries simply because we buy so many groceries, right? So that's some real quick value that can have, but that doesn't really have any impact on where the business is going to go from the time that you buy it. That's just cost reduction. Horst Schulze, I don't know if you've heard him. He spoke at he was the founder of the Ritz-Carlton.
Okay.
And we got to spend some time with him, and he was telling us that any idiot can take the flowers out of the lobby, right? Anybody can do that. You can cut the cost of that, right?
Yeah.
Like I can cut, but what that does to the people that work there, to the guests that come in, that's something that's really difficult to measure. But we all know what kind of impact that has on the experience. So like we can go into a business and you can just slash stuff and maybe make a marginal improvement for a short period of time, but like that's not really value.
Yeah, you can only cut costs so much because then you start infringing on the experience.
Yeah.
And have you read the book Unreasonable Hospitality?
Yeah.
So very similar. It's like that's what finding the uncommon things to be able to do that. And it's like in any one of your, and I frequent homegrown more than anything else within the brands, but it feels different. When you walk in there, yes, you're getting a better experience because you know that. I mean, I'll be honest, the wait staff that are at homegrown, all of them are like, you can tell they care. They feel there's that buy-in, and I feel like I see the same ones every time I'm there. So it shows that commitment. It's not this constant turnover, but it's like you've given them you've empowered them from the general manager all the way down to the person who's bussing the tables too, and everything.
Well, we've tried, and I think we all got surprised at how much Cultivate Kindness would resonate. Yeah. Not only with guests, but with our teams. And when you talk to people that work there, they know that they are the story of homegrown, and they know that when they touch a life in those first in that first day part, that has a potential to go on and be a multiplier. Right?
Yeah, and sorry, Sam, I'm hogging all of the questions.
No,
this one.
I'm having a good time.
Well, I'm
freeloading as usual.
Kind of going back to that. So like that, brand identity versus unification. So you have 6 distinct different restaurant brands, very different. Like Applebee's and Homegrown, very different in what they provide, and same with Carlos O'Kelly's, and then also with Modern Market, and now Qdoba's involved in that. And so it's like, with those, how do you maintain each brand's unique identity while fostering a cohesive company culture? So like what you're talking about with Cultivate Kindness, with Homegrown, like, how do you take that still mindset under a brand that's Applebee's, which is a part of a franchise, and you're the franchisee of it? Like, how do you do that amongst all the brands that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is a relatively new phenomenon, but really, Saznak was not a known thing. We never talked about Saznak. We never, we never leveraged Saznak in a global kind of thing that you're a part of Saznak.
Yeah.
We've done that with Thrive. You are, whether you work for Qdoba, Homegrown, Applebee's, you are a part of Thrive. Thrive is about trying to figure out how to unlock human thriving and flourishing through work, right? That's what we are uniquely positioned to be able to do. Then each brand has a different expression of that. In Homegrown, it's cultivating kindness. In Carlos O'Kelly's, it's celebration and generosity. Free chips. Come gather with your whole family. It's easy to have large groups there, right? It's a party. It's queso. It's margaritas, right? Applebee's, even though we didn't create that concept, it has a really strong vibe of just being a good neighbor.
Yeah.
This is a place, in a lot of the towns that we're in, we're the nicest restaurant in town. This is where people go. Like, we have people go to prom dinner at Applebee's, right? So how do we be a great neighbor to people, right? In, gosh, now I'm blanking on
Qdoba or Modern Market.
Yeah, Modern Market is all about, good for you food. So when you come in, how's the food good for you? How is the interaction with people good for you? In Qdoba, we haven't opened any of those yet.
Yeah.
But that's also about clean eating and convenience and being able to get. So like every brand that we have, what we try and figure out is like, what is the overarching value of this? And then how do we connect people to it through the work? And we haven't found any that have been in competition with the Thrive umbrella. Yeah. We think it's actually the Thrive umbrella has enhanced the values of each one of those because it gives them something specific to hold on to, and paints a picture of like, oh, I know what it looks like I know what it means to be a good neighbor. I know what it means to be a bad neighbor too. Yeah. Right? I know what it means to cultivate kindness. I know what it's like to be mean. And so like you can create real juxtapositions for people and then help them choose the value that we know they're going to build and connect inside that brand. So,
Homegrown has been your brand that you've grown organically yourselves, but in the past few years, you acquired several Applebee's and then also recently acquired Modern Market. And so those are kind of back to your original thought of, having them buy into what you're doing, having patience with them. So walk through the acquisition process, and maybe you can either talk about Applebee's or with Modern Market or both. But what did that look like from your standpoint, from a people standpoint, when you were approaching Applebee's, these ones? Because you guys went from being like, you became the largest Applebee's franchisee through this acquisition.
We're number two.
Number two.
Yeah,
okay.
number two. Yeah.
Okay.
They are the best, though.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, we like to believe that we are, but no, there's some great franchisees in the Applebee's system. We could do a whole podcast on that. I want to communicate too. It's like we do not believe that we have the answers when we go in and do an acquisition. A lot of these businesses have been around for a very long time. Like, we're not buying stuff that just popped up overnight. I mean, Modern Market, well, a lot of people haven't heard of it. I mean, it's been around for 20 years.
Okay.
Like, it's done something, right? And so we see, hey, we can add some value to this, but I think more importantly, I didn't say this earlier, we're going to learn something as we enter into this. And I would tell you, with every single acquisition, whether the businesses were distressed or whether the businesses were in good shape, we have learned something that we have integrated into the way that we move forward and that we do the business. So like, all of these make us better. And then we also feel like we can make things better for people too. And so there's this virtuous cycle of, it's not a rescuer, it's not, white horse sort of thing. It's like, man, there's a lot of great people that have been doing really good work for a long time. That's what even makes this acquisition possible. Let's learn from that, and then let's bring some things that we think are going to be of benefit to their experience as well. And so we really approach it from that standpoint of learning, and that's where the patience comes in. It's not just being patient to help someone conform to what you think they ought to be doing. It's being patient to really learn about why do we do things the way that we do them? And before you start taking out bricks, you really understand, like, why are they there? And how can that benefit systemically, or that we need to continue or carry forward? So I would say that I think that answers your question.
Jake and Sam here.
Thank you for joining us. If you find this content helpful, please like, subscribe, share it with a friend, and especially leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or iTunes. Really helps us out a lot.
Yeah, 1 star, it's on Sam.
Yeah, it's definitely on me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it was more of because my wife and I, we granted a lot smaller scale, we purchased Orange Theory from a previous franchisee, and we were inheriting a culture that was already there, inheriting people that were already there. And, I learned this the hard way because I tried to implement a lot of, I knew where improvements could happen, and I knew from a marketing standpoint, from a brand awareness standpoint, lots of different things. And I tried to instantly start impacting those from day one versus actually listening, being patient. And I'm not a very patient person, as many know. But I mean, honestly, COVID happened shortly after we bought it, and that actually forced me to pause. And that was great because I was doing a lot of things that was hurting the culture that was already there. Not saying it was a good or bad culture, but these people were already used to something. Previous franchisee was an absentee owner, lived in Denver, and so they never saw the owner, but maybe once a month, once a quarter. And now here I am every single day. And that was a change for them, and I didn't understand how difficult that was from their standpoint. And so it's like, looking back on, I think I would have done a lot more listening in that first 60, 90 days. Before actually making some changes that I knew were going to help improve the bottom line, improve top line revenue, whatever. But it's like that patience side of it. It's like, that's you guys go invest a lot of money in the acquisition, and it's forcing yourself to be patient because you want to change things like that. We got to be patient. We got to listen. We got to know what's going on.
Yeah, you obviously see opportunities when you do an acquisition, right? There's but
that's why you do them.
That's the connection, though, of those numbers to what the numbers really represent. And it represents people and what they do and how they do it. And as we have learned, and it sounds like as you've learned, you can go blow that up real fast. Right? And and you can make it a lot worse very, very quickly. But it's so natural because we think about these things in these static environments, and it's like, no, like this this is produced through processes and tasks and activities and leadership and the conditions that people are working with. So yeah, it's a good reminder.
Yeah. You can't financially engineer people.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, you can try, but
You can try. You can try.
Yeah, Ryan, I want to follow up on a couple of things that you
Yeah.
brought up. And you've probably heard it described this way as well, that culture is kind of a product of what you create and what you tolerate, right? And I really like the mindset that you bring to, understanding what's there, learning from it, being really patient, walking alongside people, inviting them in. How do you balance creating that environment where they understand and receive that invitation and have time to, really buy in, with, at the other end, not tolerating things that can become toxic to your culture?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is one of the hardest, and I'd actually take it a step further. So there's the things that are toxic to the culture, and then there's just like lack of performance, right? Or lack of results, right? I think you can have two. With the toxic, so we have 3 values that we really stick to. So relationships, respect, and results. In the results value, what we talk about is not what results we produce, it is how we get the results. Right? So it is very much focused. We know, because again, you take this view of like, hey, here's all these people, their attitudes, their behaviors, their work relationships, the dynamics, that is producing the financial outcomes of the business. So how this is done has a direct impact on this, right? And the sustainability of this. So like you said, you can go in and cut something, run it through fear, command and control, and over time, this will suffer. At some point, this will suffer. Right? And so we believe that the most important work that we do is not the actual job, but it's like how we do the job. And that entails how you treat with other people. We have a handbook, as most companies do. It's written a little bit differently than others. Like we wrote it from an appreciative approach. So basically, hey, here's all the things that you need to do here to be successful. Not a whole bunch of lists of here's all the things that you can do to get fired. Right? So we took an appreciative approach to it. But we have a section called the no asshole rule. And Bob Sutton wrote a great book on that. And in a lot of these jobs we have, it's really easy to tolerate assholes that are high performers and very low in trust, right? But they get good results, so we keep them. And we had to name that in our guidebook so that, again, we could hold ourselves accountable to not letting that exist on our teams. And it is the most read section of our guidebook. Not surprisingly, it's the most referenced part of our guidebook, from hourly team members all the way to the executive team, right? Like people know what that means. And here's the thing, when you put that out there and then you let that exist, that, when we talk about showing people, that shows people. Right. And so we create these lines where we are holding ourselves pre-accountable. I'm not sure if that's a word, but we're trying to hold ourselves accountable up front to how we do the work together. The harder part, so that I feel like toxic behaviors are getting easier to deal with. The harder part is, how do we take homegrown, for example, a culture of cultivating kindness? How do you adjust hours to what the business needs? How do you give coaching? How do you give hard feedback? How do you help people get better inside of this context of kindness, right? And so you have to reconcile those two to move the business forward, because you can have kindness and no results or performance, or you can have performance and results and no kindness. But the hardest thing that we are trying to figure out, and we do not have the answer, is how do you marry those two into this really beautiful thing where we're coming alongside you, Sam, saying, hey, here's what I'm seeing. It needs to change. We're here to do it with you. We're not saying, hey, you just got to go figure this out on your own and improve it. Like, that's the how part, right? We're going to help you get better. Like, how do we do it together? But man, I don't know about you. I didn't grow up getting taught how to have conversations like that. That's not how my parents talked to me about changes I needed to make or whatever. And so, in a lot of ways, we are teaching people how to care, teaching people how to coach, teaching people how to have hard conversations. And so it is a journey that my guess never ends as we endeavor to do this, but it's a conversation that we have to keep at the forefront because you risk losing one, or you risk losing culture, or you risk losing results.
Yeah.
If you don't try and marry them up. And so,
Well, and that's kind of a question that kind of leads into that is like, how are you utilizing technology in connecting employees, scaling, training, reinforcing that culture you're talking about amongst 8,000 employees, several different states. So how are you leveraging your tools, whether it be technology or other things that you're doing to help, translate that down to the hourly worker that's working at the homegrown in Des Moines, for an example?
The short answer is we're not.
Okay.
We're not. We're taking a very human approach to it. And that's not just like, oh, these guys, don't want to do technology. It's not easy to find platforms that enable you to do that. And so one of the ways that we've talked about structuring the organization is that, a lot of organizations, you have layers of management that are all about span of control. Right. So this role has this responsibility and they have these decision-making rights. And then this role has these and so on and so forth. What we've tried to refocus people onto is the idea that your role as a manager exists for relationship. Because we know that it is in these interpersonal connections, it's in the coaching, it's in helping people master their jobs, it's in creating advocates, it's in the conditions that you create as a leader that all of these things are going to happen. If you are permissive and you let asshole behaviors slide, guess what's going to happen? You're going to see a lot more of those behaviors. If you don't, you will see a lot less of those behaviors, right? And so what we've done, for better or for worse, and if anybody out there has a technology solution for this, I'm open. We have tried to take this culture as close to everyone as possible. And so what we've committed to is like, hey, the thing that we can do organizationally is just make sure you've got a really good boss. And then their job is to make sure that their person has a really good boss, and so on and so forth, right? All the way down, so that what we are creating in the restaurants, not out of Wichita, like Wichita shouldn't be the mothership in that regard, but like it should be distributed across the organization. And so we talk about, it's like, hey, if you're a front of house supervisor on a shift, the relationships that you are being asked to steward and develop are the ones here on the shift today. The general manager, you've got a management team. You don't have the whole staff. You have a management team that you lead, and they have to be empowered to be in relationship, these coaching relationships, these with their team members, and so on and so forth. And so it's really about trying to. It's one of the easiest ways to destroy value in a business is to have people functioning at the role that they are responsible for. So if I'm a general manager and I'm functioning as the kitchen manager, well, then the kitchen manager has to function as a kitchen supervisor, and the kitchen supervisor then has to function as a team member, and you destroy the relationships and you destroy the value creation of each one of those roles all the way down. And so what we've tried to do is take this human approach of saying, hey, we want you to embody the fullness of your role. We want you to own the relationships of your role. And our obligation and the leaders that we hire is to make sure that you have a good boss, and then set the expectation that that is what we want for everybody in the organization, because we believe that work can be a place where you show up and you've got more energy when you leave than when you get here, that you can help achieve your financial goals, your personal goals, your career goals because of this work experience. And so it all ties back to this idea of thriving and flourishing. And so when we can connect even the way that we structure the organization to that, you start seeing you start seeing that thing turn, and so and you learn from it.
No, I love that. And I mean, it seems like you've really figured out a lot of things that are working well for you. Do you feel like you're starting to see some of those results as you've continued to grow the organization, especially so rapidly over the last couple of years, to start to see this learning that you've acquired and that you've started to apply? Do you feel like you're starting to see it really, produce the results that you're getting excited about?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I think one of the things that we have seen is that we can have an organization where we invite people into it through acquisition, through hiring, whatever it is, and that we can take something that is significantly underperforming and turn it. And we've done this six times now, right? You can take it from a negative and turn it into a positive. That we feel really, really good about. Taking it from the positive to like from good to great, not to cliche business stuff, but like taking it from good to great, that is, I think, the next season for us. And we've not figured that out.
Well, have you defined what great looks like?
I mean, there are, that's a really good question. I think we have ideas of it. I think we have ideas of it in terms of, there's some financial performance things of it. There's some of the benchmarking that we do across people in the industry. There's some internal metrics that we have, like turnover. It's like, we're really good at, we can go from 250% turnover to 100% turnover. But man, how do you go to 80? Like, how do you then start outperforming the industry?
Yeah.
And I would say that we aren't outperforming the industry. But we're really good at taking stuff that's really well below and getting it to a place that it is sustainable. It is a great business. It's a great acquisition. It's a great use of capital and time and energy. So I think that's the next season for us.
That's interesting. It sounds like you guys are doing things a lot of things much differently than other folks in your industry. I mean, especially when it comes to culture creation. And I'm curious if, and this is probably outside the scope of the podcast, but I'm curious if the industry is the right benchmark.
Well, that's a fair question. That Horst Schulte said, he was on the board of Chick-fil-A, and they were like, hey, we're going to be the best fast food, the best. And he's like, well, you're going to be the best of a bad lot.
Right.
Like, so what?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, I hear you talk about how you've invested in your people, and, I can imagine all the results that creates, leveling up their skills, improving their environment, that I'm sure spills over into their personal life, improving the environment around them. And, healthy, successful people tend to attract more opportunities. And so I'm curious on something like turnover, for example, if, certain types of turnover, the reasons for turnover, maybe tell you different things about the success of the cultural, creation that you have, that, the same turnover level, for example, in a different kind of organization would not support those same results. And is that, sort of back to how do we define greatness? What is success in this? Is it to get these people to stick around longer, or is it to, maximize, their thriving while they're here and the level of thriving that they contribute to continuing, past their time here with the company? And, you really got my
I
gears
think that's what
turning
makes
on
it
that.
hard. It's like, how do you measure human flourishing?
Right.
Like, it's like, it when you see it,
Right.
but it's like, how do you, I don't know that we're ever going to put out a book or a annual report and say, well, we are at 80% human flourishing this year, and I feel pretty good about that. And, going down, but like,
There's a consultant that wants to sell you an index for that, I'm sure.
Right, right. Well, and actually Harvard has a great group that is focused on human flourishing, and they've got ways to measure that. And but there's something even about that just feels, it's like, is that what we're really trying to do, is like measure it like that? Or are we, the stories are what are just so life-giving, and watching transformation happen. And that's what we know has happened, and we've seen it happen before our eyes. Dozens of people have experienced it. And that's what keeps us going. But it's a great question. Like, what is our measure? Right.
Well, and you have so many different variables that play into the measures that you can actually quantify and monitor. Like on turnover, for example, that one just sounds like such an interesting thing to continue to learn about, and how it integrates with your culture.
Well, it is, and it's like,
performance.
because we're in the restaurant business, like. It's a high
Right.
turnover business. I
Right.
think even if you, even Chick-fil-A has high turnover, right? I mean, like, so it's a really good question. You got my wheels turning too.
And like in the food industry, I mean, margins are so thin, and it's like, and you have to balance that. I mean, and that's what you all are trying to strike, is that balance between financial performance, because you have to have it, because if you're losing money,
Yep.
you can't be in business.
Right.
But you also need people to help influence the financial performance too. So that balancing act, especially in the industry, because, one bad, month can, one bad day, one bad whatever can hurt, the bottom line quickly because the margins are so thin. So, I mean, that striking that balance. And so maybe talk about in your leadership team, because we were joking about a friend of ours that works with you about like that difference between like spreadsheets and people. And, and how do you all work together when you're talking about the performance of your brands?
Well, like we were talking about him. It's like it's so important that you have people that are good and care about different things. Like if we all cared about, if we all had my point of view, around how do we create leadership conditions, structures, processes, to improve things. If that's all we had, we would be missing a ton. So like I think like the only reason to be a manager, the only reason to be an executive, is because you get to pick the team. Like I can't think of any other compelling reason why you would want to do that job except you get to pick the team. And so what are the capabilities of the team that you have surrounded yourself with? And, John will tell you that we do not always agree with him. We had meetings yesterday where we don't see things always the same way. We're not always like-minded, but we're like-hearted. And we each bring a unique point of view to a conversation, right? That can help reveal, another aspect or something that we missed, and then bring it back to the challenge. You brought back the question of like, well, what is your measure for success? That's a great question that I'll think about, but that's not going to be the thing I lead with, right? And so you need to have that person in the room asking that question. And so, who are the people that you assemble to be in? So I think picking that team and making sure that, again, they are being able to step into the full responsibility for their roles is super important.
And I love what you said. You said like-hearted but not like-minded. And that point with that is, I mean, because you're all in Thrive because you believe in the mission, the culture, what it stands for, but you're not like-minded because you come with different experiences than John does. John comes with different experiences than Paul does, and then Sally down the hall and vice versa. I mean, like everybody has a different point of view, and you need that at the table because if all of you thought the same, I mean, you would still be, just Carlos O'Kelly's and Pizza Hut and all things that were Sasnac, but you wouldn't have scaled to where you're at now until you started doing that.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And based on one of the comments that you made earlier about some of the companies that you acquire where they have been able to perform at particular levels and sometimes underperform through a management style or a culture that tightly controls things. And when you view, creating a really healthy culture that creates a environment in which, team members can thrive, is that something that you can, where that control mindset just has to completely go away, or does it change the things that you try to control, or you just have to kind of completely give up that, that desire to try to micromanage results all the way down through those leadership levels that you mentioned?
That's a great question. So think about it. We use a gardener metaphor to talk about management and leadership. And one of the things that we talk about in that is there are structures that you can put in place that kill stuff, right? They're constraining. They limit growth. They just don't allow things to thrive. And then there's structures that are liberating. Right? So like when you think about growing tomatoes in a garden, if you don't put that little metal cage thing around them, they're going to grow out onto the ground and get eaten by the bugs and they're not going to thrive, right? They have to have those structures to grow on. And I think early in Thrive, we got rid of the little cage thing, the liberating structures that people needed. And we just said, hey, use the mindsets, make good decisions. And a lot of people are like, that's great. Thank you. We feel very trusted. Now, will you help us understand what we, now will you help us understand like what the,
need a little more here.
And so we have started stepping more and more into like, how do we create structures that
Yeah.
empower people to
Right.
make decisions, but also
Yeah.
give them some boundaries. People want boundaries. You know,
Right.
Picasso had
Yeah.
an edge of the canvas.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the canvas stopped at some point, right? And so
Yeah.
he had that to work with. And so
Yeah.
what we try and do is figure out how do we give people something to work inside of,
Yeah.
but then also knowing that this isn't a mandate.
Right.
This is the best knowledge that we have today. We want to involve you in that process. So around budgets, like
Right.
we involve all the restaurant managers in creating their own budgets. It's not something
Right.
that comes down from on high, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
it's worked. It's informed by what they know about their marketplace because they're the closest. They're the closest to it. So
Yeah.
they should have a big say in what that looks like.
Yeah.
And then we can say, okay, well, what if we
Right.
did a little bit more? And then
Right.
what would you need to, do this? So I think it's about
Yeah.
these liberating structures versus these constraining structures. And we typically see that as command and control
Right.
leadership. It's authoritarian, right? It is do what
Yeah.
I say because I'm telling you to do it.
Yeah. That,
And we all know how that makes us feel, right?
Yeah.
Like,
the fear versus love motivator that you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Jacob and I have talked about a number of times on this idea that the value that an organization ultimately creates is the aggregate of the value of all the individual decisions that lead up to it. And some of what you just said made me think about that a little bit differently. Of how at an organizational level, some of the total value that's created depends on what is the decisional velocity and the quality of those decisions. And so the more people that are making decisions, the higher the quality of those decisions, the more aggregate value it's going to produce. And then thinking about how like those cultural structures that you put in place can multiply and optimize, the decision making. Because if somebody has no constraints, they have no structure,
Yep.
then they're trying to make all of these very difficult decisions that consume a lot of energy on like, what can I do? How do I optimize in here?
right.
And when you define the constraints for them, you create a safe environment in which, the vine can climb the cage,
Yeah.
so to speak, from a,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I love that, man. I think that,
Well, and then I think the other thing that you're hitting
Yeah.
on too is it's like it's not just getting everybody involved in making decisions. It's in the decisions that are best made in the role that the person has. So like
Right.
the general
Right.
manager should have a different decision set than me,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
I've got to be careful about making decisions that take away decisions from that role.
right.
Right. And so
Right.
like, how do you, it's about respecting these
Right.
roles and teasing this thing out. So it's
Right.
not all just right here.
Right.
Right. That it's everywhere. And so
Yeah.
the hard part with having a lot of people and a lot of smart people and a lot of good people is that you can end up ginning up a whole bunch of activity and decisions and all of that doesn't really create a lot of value, but keeps people busy.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
maybe distracts people, who experience the consequence of that activity from doing and making the decisions that they really need to make that are the most valuable for their role to advancing. So, I mean, it is just this constant, it is this constant dance.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's really, it's really fun.
Yeah. No, I love it, man.
So.
I mean, back to your analogy of kind of the of comparing it to a garden. I mean, the culture really feels like the soil in some sense.
Well, yeah, the conditions that you create. I mean, I could
Right.
get into the gardener
Yeah.
metaphor, but I don't want to bore the audience. But
Tune in for the post
But it's-
episode, the after show.
Well, we're coming up on towards the end of the time here,
Yeah.
and it's you've touched on this a little bit, like like kind of looking at the future of specifically within restaurants, hospitality, like with Thrive continue to grow. What's next for the culture and people strategy and industry that's constantly evolving? I mean, you guys are again going back to what are you comparative to, like what's the industry averages, those sort of things. I mean, you guys are trying to go above and beyond to what's typical in the restaurant hospitality industry, but like kind of talk about what you see as what's next for culture and people, not only just for Thrive, but just as the industry in general, because you guys are kind of seen as this, what I see is you guys are kind of this like staple that people look to of like how you're building. A lot of people are watching, how is Thrive doing? What are they doing?
You might be overstating that,
Well,
but I
maybe
think there's
from
a
the
couple
standpoint,
people maybe that watch. But I think
Yeah.
our hope is to continue leaning into this learning posture of like, what really does make a difference and what difference can we make? And then trying to get that story to companies in the industry. Look, I mean, it is such a gift to be able to work in this industry. It is such a cool industry. It is one of the only industries where, you've got people, that work for you for 30 years or only work for you for 3 months for the summer or, have overcome significant, economic or personal situations, and they need a place to land, and they need a place to make some money, and they need a place to people going to medical school. One of my daughters got bit by a dog, and the ER doctor sewing her up. It's like, I worked at Carlos O'Kelly's all through medical school, and I'm like, hey, could you focus? It'd be great if we could just stay on task here.
That's awesome.
But I mean, so it is this cool industry, and it's like, you can lead a multi-million-dollar business, and in some cases not even have a high school education, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of the industries that really is the American dream for people. You can learn skills that transfer. You can stay and have a career. You can, so it's got such a wash appeal. I think there's an article that talked about the most interconnected economic, like the place where people that are living in different economic realities connect is in restaurants, and specifically chain restaurants like Olive Garden and Applebee's and places like that where it's one of the only places where people cross and connect. And so I think the future for the industry is actually really bright. We talk about technological disruption as we were, I can't remember if that was in the podcast or before the podcast, but these are jobs, and like, people need to eat food, and they're not always going to cook it at home. And if you can create a place where people want to serve and are good at serving and are empowered to serve and they care about it, man, I just think the future is bright for this work. And as we see other industries get disrupted through technology, this is one that I think is only going to be enhanced. Yeah. And we're trying to keep our eyes out for how we can bring that to bear. It's why we started a point of sale company, where all of the when you go into our restaurants, you see them using the tablets and stuff. It just makes the whole thing a lot easier. And so, like, how do we make the hospitality industry something that is continually attractive to people living really different lives, but that is centered around just the care of people and them being cared for as well. And I think if we can continue working down that road and encouraging other people to think about it that way, I think we'll feel really good about our legacy, as we move through the next years. Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Well, Sam, you want to close it out for us?
Yeah. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us.
It's so great to be here.
This stuff just fascinates me, and really appreciate you sharing a lot of your experiences, your wisdom with our listeners. Yeah, one of our big goals here is we want to help folks grow and then transition great businesses, because we know that when people have successful transitions, that wonderful things happen at a community level, and that really strong businesses are critical to building thriving local communities. And so thank you for investing in our listeners here.
It's a pleasure.
So appreciate
Thanks for having me.
And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us today. What you do matters. It really makes a big difference. The people that you lead, the people that you serve, keep after it. Stay encouraged. You're doing a great job, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for joining us today. For future episodes, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And please check out our website at www.goforemanlaw.com/learning.